Okay.
Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, Board of Education members as well. This is Monica Tuma, the clerk for Durham County. It is now 9 a.m. and we are live on YouTube. We do have the current members online now. We have Chair Brenda Howerton, Vice Chair Wendy Jacobs. We have Commissioner Alam and Commissioner Carter. We also have Board Chair Umstead. We have board members Raven, Byer, Vice Chair Lewis, and Member Valadares. I believe I said that correctly. I apologize if I did not. I am still admitting members in, but we do seem to have a quorum, so we can move forward.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, everyone. So it is 9 o'clock and we will call the meeting to order. So if there are any agenda adjustments that anyone has. So the first thing is to approve our minutes. The May 18th, 21 minutes, are they? I didn't see them in the package. Did I miss them, Monica?
Yes, ma'am. They were included last night, and then this morning I sent an update. There were two name changes that were suggested or that were asked of by Vice Chair Jacobs that were revised, but other than that, they were included in the packet.
So everything was in the package. It was just updates that I missed.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
All right. Anyone else have any questions about the minutes? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move we approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. All in favor? Do we need a roll call, or can we just raise hands this morning, Monica?
My apologies, I was on mute. We can do a roll call if you would prefer.
Okay.
I can call the members that are present on the line.
Okay.
Commissioner Alam?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jacobs?
Yes.
Chair Howerton?
Yes.
Board Chair Umstead?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lewis?
Yes.
Member Raven?
Yes.
Member Byer?
Yes.
Member Davis? Member Valadares? I think we're good to go.
Okay. So minutes have been approved. So our first presentation this morning is PreK update. And we have our deputy superintendent to kick this off, and also Linda Chevelle. So if you'd like to name all of your representatives that's going to be in this presentation, we'll start with you.
Good morning, Chair Umstead, Chair Howerton, County Commissioners, other board members, Dr. Mavinga and other staff. My name is Nakia Hardy, and it's my pleasure this morning to provide an early learning update. If we can go to the next slide, please. If you'll go forward, perfect. Thank you so much. This morning, we would like to provide an update regarding our early learning in pre-K connected to our strategic plan, as well as information regarding our community collaboration, transition to kindergarten, and updates regarding this academic year and beyond. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize Dr. Debbie Pittman. She is our Assistant Superintendent for Specialized Services. Unfortunately, Dr. Suzanne Cotterman is unable to be with us today. She is our Director of Early Learning. Many of you have had the pleasure to interact with her, and her team have really worked to contribute to this presentation and information that we're going to share today. At the end of the presentation, both Dr. Pittman and I are more than happy to take any questions and will be available for discussion. This time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pittman, who will share some additional specific information. Dr. Pittman.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy, and good morning, everyone. Next slide, please. We'd like to begin with a brief review of our strategic plan and the addendum strategies that were adopted in January of 2020, specifically to the work supporting pre-K. We are dedicated as a community to our youngest learners, and we are continuing to progress in this work. Reflected specifically on this slide, these 5 strategies connect deliberately to our strategic plan strategies, priority strategies 1, 2, and 3 around increasing academic achievement, providing a safe environment that supports the whole child, and attracting and retaining outstanding educators and staff. As you look at the strategies, I'll highlight the first, second, and third specifically target supporting our faculty and staff around professional development. The first being focusing on kindergarten standards, helping our pre-K teachers understand literacy and math goals and standards for kindergarten as they work with our youngest learners. The second is around coaching our pre-K teachers around best practices in literacy and math. And then jumping to the third bullet, supporting our teachers in understanding exceptional children's area. The inter-rater reliability, making sure that when we are working with our students that our teachers get accurate information on how the children are performing and progressing. And so we want inter-rater reliability across all of our teachers. And then most importantly, the last bullet, really focusing on supporting the social emotional learning of our youngest learners and making sure that we have a supportive, positive school climate and are supporting children around trauma-informed strategies. So next slide, please. So this slide will highlight 4 major areas of our work underway in Durham Public Schools around community collaboration, pre-kindergarten and kindergarten resources, how we're supporting children as we transition to kindergarten, and just a summary of some of our staff around the Office of Early Learning. So as we all know, we partner closely with community agencies, including Durham's Partnership for Children and Durham PreK, to share opportunities so that we are supporting all things pre-K. These partnerships have allowed us to present to the community, our parents, childcare providers on such topics, most recently this last year, on entering preschool, some of the special education needs, and transitions to kindergarten. So we're continuing to build this collaborative network to make sure our families and our community agencies have a comprehensive and informed experience. Next, call attention to our new, relatively new kindergarten website and video series. This website allows our pre-kindergarten families to get a sense and to support them as they're transitioning into kindergarten. So there is a countdown to kindergarten site that has lots of resources and information, and a new video series for kindergarten families that includes short informational videos on information such as how to enroll, what services are available, services to support students with disabilities, and also information about our Family Academy that supports our families throughout their experience in Durham Public Schools. We've included that hyperlink on the slide to allow access to those resources in a convenient manner. As we gear to open school August 24th, we also want to call attention to the work we're doing to make enrollment in school very smooth and easy. We have an online enrollment portal. We've had positive response to the enrollment that it allows convenience of registering and enrolling for school through the convenience of a laptop, a tablet, or a phone. We also recognize that some folks may need some additional support, and so we have created enrollment teams at our schools to assist. We also have the Office of Student Assignment and critically the ESL, or the English as a Second Language Registration Center, that is housed to assist families that may need language support through either phone call consultation or indeed a one-on-one appointment so we can shepherd the families through enrollment to make it easy. And then finally, calling attention to the work of our leadership team. Dr. Hardy mentioned Dr. Suzanne Cotterman. Her department has 8 staff members that are responsible for child find, the preschool assessments, screening, evaluation, and placement. They're responsible providing professional development and coaching to our pre-K teachers, and of course, supporting the WITted school. On our next slide, I want to call attention to our most recent team member who's joined us, who's working with early education that will support the universal screening process. So before I get into introducing Ms. Humphrey, I want to send a special thank you to the Board of County Commissioners, our Board of Education, and of course, Dr. Mabenga and Dr. Hardy for their ongoing support of early education. As evidenced in April of 2021, we were able to create a permanent full-time position that is supporting specifically the work around the universal pre-K expansion in Durham County. Ms. Humphreys has worked in Durham Public Schools for 17 years. She holds a master's degree in early childhood studies and a Bachelor of Science in Child Development. She's a licensed birth through kindergarten teacher with experience in early education, experience in exceptional children's programs, and experience at middle and high school. So combining her history across all those grade spans, we acknowledge Ms. Humphrey brings a unique experience and support to our work with our earliest learners. Her key responsibilities are highlighted on this slide, most importantly, focusing on the universal pre-K screening, but she, of course, will support the whole program. So we welcome her and thank you again for your support. So the next slide, I want to just highlight our plans for the upcoming year and where we're going beyond. So next slide, please. As you can see on this table, we are continuing to expand our pre-K classrooms and our PreK seats. So in the first column, last year, Durham Public Schools had 61 classrooms serving our pre-K students, both through general education and special education. For this coming school year, the 21-22, we will be opening 4 additional classrooms that will bring our total to 65. Then, with the opening of Lyons Farm Elementary in 22-23, we will be able to add 3 additional classrooms, bringing our total in the district to 68. So over the next 2 years, Durham Public Schools will increase by 7 additional pre-K classrooms serving special education students and our blended special ed and general education students. And as new elementary schools are brought on board, such as Elementary F, pre-K classroom space will continue to be included. So just briefly, as we look at the number of seats that this will result, in the second row, we can see that Durham Public Schools will grow from 784 seats to 858, which is an increase of 74. And then the following year, expand 56 additional seats to 914. I do want to say, as you can see, due to your ongoing support by the county commissioners, the Board of Education, and our superintendent, we have been able to be intentional in our planning to expand classrooms, which will result in expansion of seats. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. So in sum, next year, we're excited that we will be able to have full classroom rosters. We will expand with 4 additional classrooms. We'll be able to collaborate as a result of our universal programming facilitator. We're excited about opening Lyons Farm and those additional classrooms, and then in turn, Elementary F with continued expansion. And all of this with the ongoing focus and support around our strategic plan. Next slide. But this time, it will be our pleasure. I'll turn it back to Dr. Hardy, and we'll be able to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Pittman. At this time, we are open to have questions. Also, as Chair Howerton noted, Linda Chappelle is also part of the call, facilitates the pre-K governance committee for Durham County pre-K as well. And so we're all here to answer any questions that you may have regarding early learning in pre-K.
Thank you. Linda, is there anything that you'd like to present?
I have some updates and I'm happy to do that now if you want me to.
Yes, please.
Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to update you on where we are with our Durham PreK initiative. Of course, Durham's program is focusing upon increasing access for all of our 4-year-olds to publicly supported preschool. Obviously, we're in a very dynamic environment, working to gauge the impact of COVID on the families that are planning to begin preschool in the coming days. When last we met together in May of 2021, we had successfully launched our online application that's accessible for all the public seats in Durham among all the agencies providing services. And at that time, we had already received 983 applications. As of August 12th, we had received 1,607 applications for preschool this year, compared with 1,296 this time last year. Also, when last we met, we were preparing to pay teachers and teachers' assistants across the public preschool COVID hazard pay bonuses. Those were paid in June, and they ranged from $917 to $1,834 per team member, depending on how many months the teams taught in person. Those funds really help teachers falling within the median salary of $50,459 per year, and TAs with a median pay range of $1,550 per hour. So we received a lot of positive feedback, obviously, about that support for our teaching teams, and Durham Public Schools teachers did also receive those funds. For the upcoming school year, we're really focused on capacity building priorities, which include really negotiating comprehensive data sharing agreements between all the public preschool agencies so that we can create opportunities for better analysis of student progress. Currently, there's a lot of barriers across agencies with sharing data. We continue to work on that. We also are creating a fund development committee to identify new opportunities for private funding of special initiatives within the program that will benefit all of the public seats, in particular looking to fund some more professional development for our teachers. We are also, this year is an RFA year, so we'll be accepting applications from new sites and school locations through an RFA process for new NC PreK as well as Durham PreK classrooms in the school year 23. And most importantly, we feel we are in the stages of implementing Durham PreK's equity plan. The Durham PreK Governance Committee has a quality subcommittee that spent over a year analyzing and reviewing needs and meeting with parents, engaging parents in discussion, and identifying what some of the barriers to access to public pre-K are for families. And in particular, identified the need to support before and after care access for families, what we call wraparound care. We identified the need to increase the number of Spanish-speaking teachers of Latinx or Hispanic background, as well as further developing an equity-based professional development plan for teachers as well as site directors, and supporting the development of anti-racist pre-K curriculum lesson planning for Durham pre-K classrooms as a strong priority. And then in conclusion, I'll share that the Durham PreK Governance Committee is really hoping that some of the local ARPA funds may be able to be used to access some of the priorities, to expand some of the priorities, including access, funding additional seats. We do have more children than we have seats for in terms of interest from families, because our public programs all have different requirements for access. We have many families who are just over the eligibility line for some of the income-based programs, and they are very much in need of access, and there are limited seats available for those families that are slightly above the income requirements, because Durham PreK doesn't have income requirements for those seats that are locally funded, but those seats are very limited at this time. In addition, through our equity work, we noted that transportation was a huge issue for parents, as many of you obviously, having worked in the public sector, I'm sure hear all the time. It was identified as a very extreme barrier for some families in terms of creating equitable access, and the Durham PreK Quality Subcommittee recommended, because it's such a daunting issue, recommended that we spend more time and really analyze the need for transportation and potential options to provide it in the future for the neediest families. So we're excited about the new year. We're also really excited about the progress that all the partner agencies have made in trying to collaborate. Things are not where we want them to be yet in terms of really having a strong infrastructure that the community can feel confident in, but we've made a lot of strides and we feel confident about the future.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks for the report from Dr. Hardy, and also who else? Dr. Pittman. Thank you for your report, and congratulations to Ms. Stephanie Humphrey for coming on board. So we'll turn it over to commissioners and board members if there are questions or comments. I see Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Linda, Dr. Pittman, Dr. Hardy, for this report. I'm so glad that we've spent some time this morning getting an update on both pre-K programs. And I just think that this is so important. And glad to hear about the increasing number of seats with Durham Public Schools and the new pre-K hire. That's fantastic. I have questions for both of you. So Dr. Pittman, what is the identified need that we have? It's great to see that we're going to be increasing each year. And then I assume with elementary school F, we'll be able to add a few more. Do you all have a projected need or capacity for what we're going to need to get to our goal of having a seat for everybody?
I may pull in that one. We're serving, of course, the obligation to serve all of the students that are identified through Child Find and our EC students. And so those additional classroom seats, particularly next year, are going to accommodate some of that critical need. And we're approaching where we anticipate the projections should be in a community our size, and particularly serving with the hospitals in our area that pull in families that often qualify for those Child Find services and exceptional children's services. So in that way, we're approaching a good place we anticipate in the next year or so. As far as the additional seats, the commitment to continue designing our schools with pre-K spaces that can serve a general or typically developing child is certainly our commitment based on the capacity of our buildings and the resources that we have. Dr. Hardy, would you like to add any?
I also saw Mr. Palmer come on camera, so I will yield to Mr. Palmer, and then if I have any additional comments, I'll follow.
Good morning, all, and good morning, Board Chair Howard.
Good morning.
Good morning, Board Chair Umstead. With regards to our efforts to support early childhood education in Durham, we are looking at inclusion of pre-K design spaces in all of our new school buildings. That includes our soon-to-be completed Lions Farm Elementary on Scott King Road, as well as Elementary School F at the intersection of MLK and Roxborough. In addition, for our elementary schools that are currently under design for renovation, we're including pre-K classrooms in those spaces as well. Many of those are older buildings that will need to be modernized, both mechanically, infrastructure-wise, as well as from a programmatic standpoint. So moving forward, we're looking at it in each of our buildings as we work through our capital program.
Thank you. And Linda, I just wanted to say, first of all, I really appreciate the role that CCSA has had in supporting our early childhood educators through the pandemic. And hearing about the hazard pay is fantastic. And just, I know that you were involved in the child care roundtable during the pandemic, trying to help support all the providers. So I really appreciate that. I'm wondering, and this, I guess it goes for DPS pre-K as well. You mentioned the use of ARPA funds to potentially help expand Durham pre-K. So I'm wondering, are you all going to be putting together proposals for all of us to consider?
So yes, definitely. The Durham Pre-K Governance Committee actually already identified some priorities for your consideration and can fully, we sent some information to you, but we hope to have the opportunity to expand upon those as proposals. We know obviously that ARPA funding should not be relied upon for long-term, long-term initiatives. But we believe that those funds can really build capacity and help us pilot some of the initiatives that were previously identified through the Durham Supply and Demand report that the county funded. You'll remember that in that report, we estimated that we had hoped to be by 2023 to have around 3,600 seats available for our 4-year-old children. So obviously with COVID, as well as the fact that that was quite an aspirational goal in such a short period of time, we're not there yet, but we do need to continue to substantially grow our capacity. Obviously the commitment Durham Public Schools has made to add pre-K over the long term to all the elementary schools goes a long way toward meeting the community need. We have an interesting break in our community where there are a substantial number of families who are really invested in having a pre-K opportunity in their public school. And then there are a substantial number of families who absolutely do not want their pre-K 4-year-old in a public school. They prefer the private option. So we really are positioned well with our development of private seats, as well as the commitment of Durham Public Schools to meet that long-term need. But our hope is that with ARPA dollars, we can really take the time to work through many of the barriers to success that have come up and build out that infrastructure more. So I think that we're working closely with the Early Childhood Action Plan initiative that the county has funded to work with the community to identify the needs. And we do hope that those ARPA funds can be leveraged to move our program forward significantly.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Alexander?
Thank you so much. I want to echo gratitude for the full-time position. I know that it was definitely a big need, to have a coordinator that was available. A lot of families, we're just talking about like the length of time, and there's always time for processing, time to find out about placement. And so just want to celebrate that. I want to celebrate the advances. I do have some questions. There's an event coming up on the 29th, and it's a PTA sponsored event that is, back to school. And when I'm talking to families about making sure they go to these events, what questions they have, they're actually asking about these things. They're asking about, childcare. And I was really attuned to when Linda was sharing about, some of the ways that the equity assessment that you've all done did, bring up transportation. It brought up, childcare, whether it's before or after school. And I just wanted to hear more a little bit just about this this equity assessment. Child find, these are all very important things about things from the report, and just what are some of the recommendations, I guess, in terms of recommendations that, both county and Board of Education can work on to ensure that we are addressing the equity gaps.
Well, the Durham PreK Governance Committee established a quality subcommittee that engaged both members of the governance committee as well as community members, parents, teachers, a variety of representatives. They spent a little over a year and a half examining different programs around the country, looking deeply at information about our community to really lift up voices and to address concerns. And there is an equity plan that was adopted for this school year coming up. It's available on the Durham PreK website and easy to find. If you don't see it, you can search by equity and it'll come up. The main focus areas for that plan were really looking at all the barriers that were identified to access. One was that we don't have a good geographic spread in our community of where the public seats are. Of course, Durham Public Schools' commitment to adding PreK at many of the elementary schools will help with that over time. But in addition, our growth in South Durham, we definitely have high demand in South Durham and not enough seats. And so just where the seats are and how many seats there are available is an issue that was addressed. But beyond that, looking at the program, really addressing the need for deep support to develop anti-racist curriculum within the PreK, while always, of course, centering play as the way our children learn in PreK. And really focusing on developing with teachers an equity-based professional development plan that would engage both teachers and directors. The good thing about the Universal PreK initiative in Durham is that the varying agencies working together and really identify priorities. So Durham Public Schools has obviously a very robust professional development plan for teachers. We want to expand that to assure that those teachers who are BK licensed, who are teaching in community sites, also engage. And we have that sharing of information and that commitment to a positive transition to kindergarten also for our children and families. So that work around equity-based professional development and really centering and focusing intentionally on really addressing the deep-rooted issues that create problems of systemic racism was really a priority. But in terms of the other program structure, things like transportation, as well as the need for RAP care, those are very resource heavy needs. And, it's not simple. Providing RAP care for PreK children is quite daunting for many of our schools, both public and private, because the PreK regulations are different in the extended school day realm. And so we have to do a lot of capacity building around RAP care. In addition, the cost of RAP care is quite expensive and many families can't afford it. And so we have to look for resources to support RAP care beyond the few resources that are available through our state subsidy dollars. And so there's quite a lot of needs, and I encourage you to read that equity plan. I'd love to talk about it more extensively. Could obviously talk about it all day, but mindful of your agenda. So thanks for asking.
Thank you, Linda. This is such a meaty conversation that we could talk quite some time about it. And we have a couple more meaty items as well. So we're going to need to move on to the next item. And I just want to say that we just finished the North Carolina Association of Counties Commissioners Conference this week. And the president of the National Association of Counties was present, and his wife was there, and his wife is a teacher. And I had an opportunity to talk to her a little bit about the things that she's doing. And on our website, you will find that there were lots of conversation about education and pre-K, because a lot of the county commissioners have either been teachers or educators in some way, or their wives are. So there's some things on the website that they will be putting up from the conference. So if we can move on to the next item, DPS school year update, and that will be Dr. Hurdy and Paul doing this presentation.
Correct. Good morning, Board of Education members, Board of County Commissioners, Dr. Mabenga, Manager Hager. Glad to be here with you and share information regarding the budget and where we stand from that standpoint. We still have a long way to go, as we all know, and we've all been hearing on the news. The House just passed their budget last week, so we're at a point now where we're waiting for them to appoint their commissions, and so we can move forward. But let's get on with the presentation. Next slide, please. First and foremost, we want to thank you, Board of County Commissioners and county staff, for working with us in this budget process this past year and supplying us with the much needed funding to move the district forward in many different ways. As you can see, we've got over $11 million that you've appropriated. That's the most that I'm ever aware of that you've appropriated in one single year. And we do appreciate it because, again, much needed for getting us where we need to be. We got about $5.6 million that you funded for operations. Charter schools, we have to share, of course, with charter schools, any appropriation you make, with the exception of capital funds and pre-K funds. So therefore, we're going to be flowing through close to $3 million in the next fiscal year additional to charters, we expect. And that'll get us, as you can see, $31 million flowing directly out to charter schools. From that standpoint, you've had some discussion on pre-K today. We have not come back to you in regards to pre-K. And as you can see, the only monies we've received in the last 8 years for pre-K directly is the $1.5 million for WITted and $508,000 a year for the overall district-wide pre-K program. That started off at $426,000, so we haven't gained a lot there in regards to funding, but expenses have gone up. We've opened up classrooms and we've done a lot more from the standpoint of supporting the pre-K program overall. As I mentioned previously in previous meetings, we have not come back to you for a request for pre-K because we are making sure that we're good stewards of our money and utilizing those funds before we exhaust those funds in a way before we move forward and utilize our other operating budget to support it. But as I've said before, we are going to be coming to you with some significant asks for pre-K because it's, again, we'll be opening up 5 more classes this year or 4 more classes this year. That's moving towards $1 million additional support that we're going to have to put into our classrooms for pre-K. We have expanded over the years. And again, we haven't come back to you for more. We've used Title I. We've used exceptional children funding from the state, and we've used our local resources to ensure that we cover positions that are required for that program. In that program also, when we talk about it, we talk about needing assessment team members. We need psychologists, social workers, nurses. There's a lot that goes into this program that we'll be coming and talking to you more about at a later date. And of course, most important facet of this is the capital funding that you've provided us to get us to that $6 million level that we've been asking for the past few years. We appreciate that very much. The 11 million ask brings us up to overall $169 million that the county is supporting, and that is much appreciated. Next slide, please. So as we talk about the local budget and what you're supporting, you have provided us, like I said, $5.6 million to move us forward. That was for salary increases, benefit increases, and other fixed costs that we had associated in there. One of the key things that we still don't know, but we'll get into a little bit later, is what those real costs are going to be. One thing we did do with the funds that you were appropriated is we provided $250 increase to our supplements, salary supplements for teachers and certified personnel. So we have increased that to up over $5,600 a year for each teacher, at least, based on the sliding scale of the salary schedule. We've already provided that to those teachers that were in year-round schools, and moving forward, that $250 increase will be for each individual teacher and certified personnel, nurses, psychologists, guidance counselors, etc. Construction and planning, the funds you provided us, we were able to solidify the one project manager early on, the planner early on. We have added our accounting specialist and also one purchasing agent specialist as well. And then you provided us the level of funding that we need at this time for our annual operating of capital outlay funds. We appreciate the $6 million total that you're providing us moving forward. You provided us $500K for additional personnel to support English learners, much needed funding, as you've talked today in the pre-K discussion about the need for Latinx teachers and things of that nature. But this is money that the state actually took off the table from us being able to use their state funds for specific program usage that we had in place. You provided us 2 additional counselors out of this funding. And also we have an Office of Equity Affairs and Multilingual Resource position that we're putting in place with these dollars as well. We're also increasing some of our custodial FTEs, or maintenance months of employment, for the purpose of expanding that program. And also we appreciate the 10 positions that you say you will be putting in place for us this year, bringing us closer to the 33 positions overall. In addition, those 10 positions, the 15 that you provide us is a much needed thing, as we know, with the pandemic still lingering, and it's going to linger for some time. So where we are with that is getting us in a better position for ensuring better quality amongst all schools, providing more resources in those schools. So thank you very much. If we can move to the next slide, please. So as we look at the state budget, the outlook is better than it has been in the past 2 years, actually, from the standpoint of the General Assembly putting out money. Of course, they had $4.2 billion that they had in regards to surplus going into the session, and that only grew as the session went on. So what we're waiting for is the next steps to find out how long it's going to take them to appoint their committees, how long it's going to take them to deliberate and come up with a budget to be passed, to find out if the governor is going to approve or disapprove, veto it from that standpoint. I think based on his commitment to teachers that he looks like he's going to veto this based on the amount that they're providing for teachers. He was wanting closer to 5% each year, and they're only looking at 2.5% to 2.6% for the purpose of moving this budget forward. They say they have the sufficient votes to override the veto. So we're going to see how this goes. But the last thing we want is for us to have another mini bill budget that does not support education appropriately. So this is something better than it has been in the past, but still a long way to go in regards to that. I do want to make mention, other than the salary and benefits, we were very close on our salaries and on our benefits. The retirement rate we projected at 22.8. The highest is 22.88% in the House. We hope it'll be closer to the Senate amount, which would provide us additional resources to ensure some of the offsets that appear to be coming from the hospital insurance, where we projected 6,500, and they're both projecting over 7,000 on an annual basis. So as they continue to move forward, in the next few years, we'll be at 30% for retirement benefits based on the way they're headed, and insurance will probably be over $10,000 in the next 5 years based on what we're seeing. So with all that said, there are a couple things that they are doing. They're moving closer to the $15 minimum an hour. From that standpoint, at 13 for this year, and they project 15 for next year. One of the big things is the principal bonuses that they've received over the years that were up to $10,000. They seem to be sliding those out of the way, as they normally do when the information's not available after a few years. We saw this with some other funding for bonuses that were provided by the state back in the early 2000s. But ultimately, they provide support across the board for everyone, moving everyone closer to what we look at as rising prices occur. Anything that they provide us is a benefit, but more and more would be better for all, as we know. So with that said, we are still on the outlook of what's going to occur with our benefits, with our salaries, and what the General Assembly will come up with a final bill. I do want to make mention that we have communicated to the General Assembly staff members, as well as we reported it to you all in regards to the information about the $730 million in fines and forfeitures. I have been very vocal on that standpoint to try to get them to provide those fines and forfeitures to districts, because the fact that this is the time to do it. They had a surplus, they have money to do it with. That would be $15 million plus for Durham Public Schools. That would assist us with our future in one-to-one initiatives, as well as upgrading our infrastructure for technology and security. So I'm still hopeful that one day soon that will happen. So from that standpoint, we're still on the lookout for next steps from our General Assembly. Next slide, please. So as we look from some of the things that the state is also doing, the Senate has a $1,000 bonus for each full-time employee out of the recovery funds. Also provides additional $500 bonus to employees with salaries less than $75,000. The House is following in similar order. $500 bonus for full-time everyone, plus $1,000 for those 75,000 or less. And for those 40,000 or less, giving another 500. So we're looking forward to how that is going to play out in the next few weeks to a month. Hopefully they'll be out of town in a month, so education can move forward smoothly. Next slide, please. At this time, I'll take any questions you may have in that regard. I have some knowledge, but limited knowledge in regards to the overall state budget and where they're moving. But I think it's looking to be moving in a better track than previously seen over the last 2 months.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for the report. Questions from board members or school board members? Commissioner Carter, and I heard somebody's voice. I heard a male voice.
That was me saying Ms. Carter waving.
I think we saw her about the same time. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. LeSueur. It's always good to see all of you school district people again. And wonderful to hear your presentation, Paul. Thank you for that information. My question is sort of ties back into our previous conversation. In thinking about our future and how we want to be funding access to preschool for all 4-year-olds, and knowing that we have multiple sources of funding and that we're braiding it together to maximize the dollar, right? Paul, you mentioned that DPS is expanding PreK sites too, and that was mentioned in the previous conversation. I'm just wondering, when commissioners and school board members are thinking about funding for these sites, whether or not when you request funding, you'll request it from us directly for your specific sites in your schools, or will, I assume now DPS is getting some funding through us, through CCSA and our Durham PreK program. And so just wondering how much money that is currently, and if you were taking that into consideration when you mentioned, you would be needing to request more in the future. Will it be a direct request, maybe is my question, or will it be a request for us to fund it through CCSA? And I'm guessing we're tracking that, but it does seem complicated.
Very good question. We will be requesting it of you from the county, which you could also work with the PreK partnership to provide us additional funding as well. One thing, we only get $320 a month per student from the PreK program, the NC PreK program, from the partnership. Other facilities are getting $500. It's in legislation that can't change. That was something they did back in like 2010, 11, 12 timeframe. They froze everything for the PreK programs. So therefore, we're woefully underfunded from the PreK program from our standpoint, from the partnership, for ensuring that we have the receipts. As long as I said, as long as I can maintain, as we continue to grow and we continue to add PreK to our schools, the cost goes up. You're talking about $1 million for 4 to 5 classes. You also have to add more social workers, as I mentioned, psychologists, assessment teams. Has been a big thing that we need to continue to do, because we have time limits on reviewing cases of these students and referring them to the program or not. So there's a lot that has to happen, and the cost for those things are growing. And just the state budget alone shows that, with retirement and hospital insurance. So yes, we will be asking for that. We hope that the infrastructure bill from the federal government that will provide free PreK for all will be something that will benefit everybody in the long run, and we'll be able to back off, not necessarily, I say back off, of the need to provide additional funding down the road. But at this point in time, the costs continue to grow. We'll do everything we can with the ESSER funds that we've received to make sure that we can keep it as minimal as possible. But there are going to be some things that we're going to have to financially ask you for to ensure that our teams are in place for the growth that we continue to see and the special needs of our EC population as well.
If I can hop in for just a second, just for clarity.
Yeah,
What Paul,
hold on a second, Linda, hang on a second. So just with Paul, so it wasn't clear what you said when the question was, are you requesting the funds through CCSA, or are there two different strands of request? I'm not clear what you just said.
My requests go to the county, right? As far as the overall programs go for funding education. If it needs to go through the private partnership, that's fine. We can flow it that way as well. I'm just saying that we're going to be coming back for some requests for funding for pre-K programs. That
I heard that. I just wasn't clear what you said, whether CCSA will make a request and you will make a request. Is that, I just want to be clear what you're saying.
I will make a request to you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
if I can hop in, just for point of clarity. So Paul is correct about, the payment from NC PreK, which are state funds. They did cap that a few years ago, unfortunately, for public schools. But for the county local funding for pre-K, for DPK designated seats in Durham Public Schools, we are paying the difference. So the school system is getting paid the $1,250 per month per child. However, that's only for those seats that are designated Durham pre-K. We have a fully, very complex, fully braided system. And, certainly Durham Public Schools has a myriad of funding sources, and pre-K certainly needs additional resources, no doubt. We've built this because we have public-private partnerships, and we have pre-K in private programs as well as in the public schools. The local dollars that are flowing through Durham pre-K are designated through an RFA process. Schools, public schools, as well as private schools, apply for seats through Durham pre-K, and those seats are funded at $1,250 per child. So the $320 that Paul referred to, that's the cap for the public schools through NC PreK, and we supplement that amount for the designated Durham pre-K seats. Unfortunately, every seat does not get that robust amount because we don't have enough seats. But indeed, the public schools will work through their process for budgeting, and for the larger universal initiative that Durham has undertaken, we will make a budget request to the county for expansion of pre-K seats. But we work in alignment and we work in partnership. So we want to assure that we are very aware of all the requests that are being made, and we try to make sure we're not working at odds.
Cool. Thanks, Linda. Other questions or comments? Keith, did I see your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Commissioner Howerton. It's Keith Lane, Budget Director for Durham County Government. Paul, I heard you say a request from DPS for pre-K support of some sort coming to the county. Would that run under the general current expense amount that we fund the county? I guess I'm always aware of the 20% surcharge that goes to charter schools. And would this pre-K money routed to DPS go through current expense funding? Because if it would, 20% goes to charter schools, unless there's a different way that funding could possibly occur.
So good question, Keith. In regards to that, you can, as you have, state that the pre-K program is out of the K-12 realm. So you can, in your budget ordinance, state that you're providing us the additional funding for pre-K directly, which keeps it away from the charter school 20%. But that might change with this General Assembly.
Board Member Byer.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to take a moment and just celebrate the partnership that the commissioners and the board have had this year in bringing such a strong support for our students. It's something that we are so appreciative of. And two things that I wanted to give Mr. Lesueur a chance to expound upon that are still concerning to me are the amounts that we are investing in hotspots to give our students connectivity. And we do have federal funding to support that in the short term. But as you all look at broadband access and infrastructure across the community, I think that would be important. And hopefully we have an update just between our leadership on where we are with the nurses and the expansion of nurses. Our families are incredibly nervous about the Delta variant. And I'd just like to have conversation together about where we are with recruiting and what needs we still have. Thank you.
Of course, the hotspots are a concern. We're hoping that, I mean, last year was really a year of trying to get plans in place for the infrastructure of the broadband internet and you were able to get it to some locations, which we appreciate, but we want to get to the point of not really having to provide hotspots because that cost was running close to $2 million for us last year. And from that standpoint, we want to try to reduce that as quickly as possible, of course, but ensure that everyone has accessibility across the board for K-12 education, as well as the community.
Our interim manager Hager can just touch base briefly on broadband and what's happening with the county conversation and also the state's dollars and federal dollars in her next presentation, if that works for you, Ms. Byer. Any other questions, comments? We can move on to the next conversation. The update from the county on the capital improvement process.
Mr. Raven.
Okay, Mr. Raven, okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chair Howerton. I just had a quick question. I do hear about the $320 that's capped for pre-K funds. Just holistically, what is the rough cost of every of the cost to educate our pre-K kids on a weekly basis? I'm just trying to get a kind of like a firm comparison. Does it cost $500, $600? Do we have a rough estimate?
We look at $1,200 a month per child is what we've estimated for the overall cost of those children. There's a lot of more need for that age group, especially those that have EC needs as well. So it's just a costly population because sometimes we have to put 2 assistants in a classroom rather than 1, depending on the number of students that are needing assistance. So
in the private programs, we estimate $1,250 a month in the private programs because obviously they don't have as many resources to spread across programs.
So if I'm hearing this right, that $1,250 is more or less for the direct costs, but there's kind of some understanding there's a lot more of additional support costs that could be needed as the programs begin to expand. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Another question, Board Member Byer.
Thank you so much, Chair Howerton. I just, the second part of my question previously about nurses, do we have constituents asking about any updates that we might have in the near future on that status? Thank you.
Manager Hager.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. The recruitment of nurses remains a challenge across the country. Some of our neighbors I know have started offering bonuses upwards. I think the last one I saw of $10,000 or $20,000. I know that's a big range of gaps. We are looking at bringing some additional options to our board for hard to recruit positions, including nurses. Before we added these additional 10, we had a vacancy level of about 10, so that we were actively recruiting for some time. It's a challenge, especially in this pandemic, trying to secure certain types of positions, and nurses are among the hardest. And so we will keep you posted on the additional creative ways that we will use. But going into this, we knew it would be a challenge, but we also knew that we would be flexible and creative in how we try to attract nurses to our community.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If you have a quick one, Commissioner Jacobs, and we'll need to move to the county update.
Yeah, this is not really directly related, but provoked by the question of nurses. And I'm wondering if we have time after we get through our agenda. I would love to just get an update from the schools about strategies and plans around how we're going to manage COVID, and thinking about the roles that the school clinics or that school nurses may be able to play in that, and how the county may be able to help support that. So that's something that I hope we can discuss after we get through the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if time will allow for that to be added. Commissioner Jacobs.
Chair Umstead has a response.
Yeah.
Just real quick.
Yeah, we had our work session last week where we went over kind of those protocols in detail. And we also talked about clinics and the role that they could play. So if we have time, we can get to it, but I would really encourage you all to watch our work session because we covered a lot of these questions in there. And I think if we have specific asks for the county, Commissioner Howerton and I have been, Chair Howerton and I have been in communication around nursing positions, around wanting to make sure we can have testing facilities and things in place to support. So we've been definitely in communication around how you all can support us and what we're doing to prepare for the upcoming school year. I think another thing to notice, even what we put in place last Thursday, we're continuing to watch trends, watch what's the best protocols and measures. So things are shifting and changing to make sure we can keep our students and our staff safe.
Thank you, Chair Umstead. And, you know, as you said, things are changing every day. So we are watching and listening to see what we need to do. Okay, we're going to move on to the Durham County update on capital improvement process. Interim Manager Hager and Keith Lane, our Budget Director, will take it from here.
Okay, great. Good morning again, everyone. We'll give some update on our capital improvement planning. Before we get started, I would like to address one of the questions that was asked about our efforts in broadband planning and how that's going. When we received the additional funds from ARPA, broadband was the highest priority internally as we looked at, well, with staff, because we've had some board conversations, but we've not gone through a ranking conversation, but it elevated high because it's an access issue for families, for children. It's an economic development issue as we look at certain pockets of the community that do not have access to broadband just because of infrastructure issues. So we came up with a few different models that we possibly could pull the trigger on. And shortly after we learned that the state and federal governments would be infusing additional dollars to communities. Some of the scenarios we considered, those were things they actually put on the table as areas that they would fund. One of the guiding principles, as you know, with the use of these dollars is to be measured in that you leverage the dollars coming from the federal and state to the extent as much as you can. Broadband has been complex because of many factors, and some of which getting vendors even to bid on projects that we've tried to do as far as analysis of what's needed in the area. That's just one example. So we are still fleshing out what our strategy will be with the federal government's infrastructure package. There are additional dollars in that for broadband. It again is a high priority. We will have better information as we get more insight. We're just really trying to be tactical. You know, some communities came out early May with plans on how they were going to do broadband. And I'm sure now that they're seeing the dollars that are coming and the support that's coming and the leverage of resources that will happen, they're probably revisiting those plans as well. So I know it's not the fastest approach in that space, but it is. I just did want to assure you that it is among the highest priorities for many different reasons. And we look forward to giving more clarity on what those steps will be as we move forward in that space. I'll transition now into the capital planning update. And Monica, you can change the next slide. This will be a quick recap from discussions we had from previous meetings, but also some refinement of our schedule. You know, sometimes we are ambitious as staff when we talk about what we can accomplish in a timeline, and for some reason, genies do not come and do that work for us. And so we've had some shifts slightly, but we're still on schedule overall. And we will also talk a little bit in greater detail about the referendum steps as well, which will be upon us before we know it. So I'll turn it over to Keith to go over the slides.
Thank you, Claudia. I appreciate it. Good morning. It's still morning. Commissioners, Board of Education folks, always nice to see you all. Again, as Claudia noted, the discussion topics of this brief presentation are going to be a little bit update on the capital planning highlights, a recap, the schedule, the upcoming refresh of the CIP the county's getting ready to do, and then some detailed dates on the next, the steps that have to we all have to go through for the bond referendum. That's the general obligation bond referendum. That will be for long-term debt issuance that's voted on by county citizens, and then there will leave some time for discussion. Next slide, please, Monica, and thank you for running this for us. So this next slide is a summary of information that our financial advisor and management have put together to sort of give a thematic overview of how the county develops its biannual, sometimes it's almost now annual, heck, these days it's almost a constant update of the capital improvement plan. It's generally a 10-year plan. It's a multi-year plan. For us, it's up to 10 years that we look at. The span of time we'll be looking at, and this next update is FY22 through FY 2031. 10-year plan. That's 2 more years added on from the plan that everybody's been looking at for the last couple of years. The whole point of a capital improvement plan is to try to prioritize any number of projects that come into the county that are requested by various folks, Durham Public Schools, county departments, outside agencies, is trying to prioritize those capital projects by importance, essentially, how essential they are, and the long-term need and our ability to fit that into our financial schedule. There's a strong emphasis in the CIP on the timing of improvements. Basically, that what we mean by timing is matching the available dollars, capital resources we have with any timing alternatives. Everybody generally wants a capital project done now or sooner versus later. And that has ramifications on our ability to issue debt. It has ramifications on the county's property tax rate, has ramifications on how our financial standing viewed by the rating agencies. So in general, the county tries to space out projects where possible to try to limit the fluctuation and of cost and project development and try to spread that out over 10-year span if at all possible. Other key areas for capital planning elements are blending borrowed funding, which is long-term debt instruments like general obligation bonds, like what we call limited obligation bonds. You'll also hear us shorten that term down to LOBS funding. Pay-as-you-go sources. Pay-as-you-go is basically another term for county cash. What that means, that statement means by blending borrowed and pay-as-you-go sources is the county tries to pay for certain projects with cash where available and where it makes sense. And then we try to issue long-term debt financing for capital projects that generally have a lifespan of at least 20 years because that's generally the debt service time frame that we pay out over. Most of you all have a mortgage on a house. You generally have a 30-year mortgage. You pay over 30 years and that's okay because the house length of time you're going to live in the house or the life of the house, the asset itself, is going to exist for hopefully at least 30 years. Same concept works for county projects and school-related projects that the county funds, in that for schools and big buildings, they generally last 20 plus years, so that's our financing source. Another essential planning element is targeting improvements that improve operating efficiencies and improve service delivery. And Durham Public Schools probably understands this as well as anyone. When you talk about older schools, the cost of keeping them up, the cost of paying for energy costs related to schools, keeping up windows, it goes on and on. Same thing for the county. So the county tends to put a high priority on projects that will improve those operating efficiencies of buildings and capital, as well as provide better service coming out of those capital items. After that, we start separating operating and capital resources essential to a large CIP. And what that means is that as part of our CIP process, when we develop the cost of a capital project, we also ask departments to try to estimate the operating cost of said capital building. Sometimes it may be a capital project. Sometimes it may be an entirely new building that needs security, that needs cleaning staff, that needs additional general services staff. Sometimes it may be a new school for Durham Public Schools that needs entirely new teachers and all those sorts of things, which in turn is going to come back to the county in terms of an operating request. The point being is those two are not inseparable. They go together. Capital projects have ongoing operating costs, and we try to build that into our capital improvement plan so we are not caught unaware when those costs are potentially coming onto an annual budget development. Some other key issues we deal with are debt affordability modeling, and that's our ability to pay. That is a really important part of our process, and it's sometimes the area that can cause the most concern or a little heartburn. We generally bring in a very well-spoken Southern man with great charm, Doug Carter and Associates, and all he tends to say over and over again is there is a limit to how much the county can issue in debt in any given time. And that goes back to some of that higher bullets we talked about, which is prioritization of projects over time, is that we get lots of projects that want to be started right now, but there's a debt affordability issue related to that as it relates to rating agencies, which means how much interest we have to pay on long-term loans, plus the amount of property tax rate, potential tax rate increase that our county commissioners have to consider to pay off any upcoming debt service. And we do all this by using a debt model to manage our constant change in our CIP. And that's it's a unique spreadsheet that Claudia had actually developed back when she was in the budget office, budget director back in 2000, Claudia. I don't know if you remember that way back.
20, what do you mean?
20 plus years ago, and we used it and enhanced it and updated it. But that debt model is the sort of key touchstone document that we show to commissioners, and we've even shown it to the Board of Education over time, that says this is how much property tax money will be needed, as well as other funding sources over 10 years. So we might have to raise the tax rate 2 cents over 2 or 3 years. But the whole point of that debt model is so we can try to show commissioners, if you choose this, it might mean a 5-cent tax rate increase next year, or it might mean a 1-cent tax rate increase next year. And we run all these projects through that debt model, and we try to make people like Doug Carter and the rating agencies happy. We try to make folks like Durham Public Schools happy, and we try to make departments happy. It's usually somewhat of a losing proposition to make everyone happy, but we try to do all of those things and mix and match these different issues. Thank you. Are there any questions about any of these points before I move on? I don't see any. Monica, can you go to the next slide, please? So with that framework in mind of how we do every CIP, develop every capital improvement plan, what are the next steps for the updatings of the capital improvement plan getting ready to happen or happening right now in the county? We are currently waiting on a facility needs assessment to be completed. And Claudia, I believe that's in either in October or September or October.
Yes, it's in the for the county, it's in the September, October timeframe. I know the schools are refining theirs as well. And so they'll sync up soon.
They'll sync up soon. And soon we will be, the Durham County Budget Office will be sending out some documents for some project prioritization and sequencing, where we're going to go and ask departments and DPS to update based on an additional 2 years on the end of the CIP for this next 10-year span. Remember, I told you it was going through 2022 through FY 2031, and we're going to look at the projects that have already been requested and ask departments and DPS to update estimated cost and timing of those projects and or any new projects that might be on the horizon, either sooner, which is in the first 5 years of the CIP, or out in the next 5 years of the CIP. Then the county, our office will get all those documents in and we will fold them all together and we will complete a detailed cash flow projection, basically based off of what's been requested. How much is it going to cost in any given year for the county to support the building of those projects? And that means paying for debt service or using county cash to support projects directly. We will then evaluate the affordability of all those requested projects. And this is where we will have to start making some hard decisions about the affordability versus when a project is being requested to be done. And we'll have to mix and match and maybe move some projects out, lower the cost of some projects, might even have to consider leaving some projects off of the CIP. That's just something we'll have to see, but it's very key that we evaluate the affordability and develop a reasonable overall CIP and debt affordability plan. Then we will turn around and update that capital improvement plan, and Claudia, as management, will present it to the Board of County Commissioners for discussion, and I'm sure the Board of Education will be keenly interested in that document, and we'll have discussions with the board as well. Next slide, please, Monica. So what are some of the major issues with capital projects that have happened over the last couple of years and we are deeply concerned about with the development of projects coming on board in the next couple of years? And it's largely due to project cost. There are some serious issues related to labor shortages and inflation on materials and goods. I won't go through this. Claudia collected this information. Thank you for that, pointing out labor costs have gone up, and we have experienced in the county any number of projects that have gone up 20, 30, 50, 80% in cost, somewhat catching us off guard. It's a good time to update our project costs for existing projects and reassess new projects, but do understand that we are getting concerned about the increasing costs of projects and the pace of that. Next slide, please, Monica.
All right, and Keith, 1 second, and just part of the reasons we added these two is, as many of you know, I have an econ background, so I'm always looking at trends and patterns. We're just in patterns right now we've not seen before for various reasons. That makes it tricky when you start planning, especially in a capital space, of what you can do and how much timing of projects, et cetera. Through the next few years, we will just have to keep refining our numbers. Keith will show a few other slides about cost, but that's the main reason I wanted to put this here, that we're just in unprecedented territory, but we'll get through it and figure out how to navigate it. And as we get closer to the November time frame, we'll have a strategy on how do you manage a capital improvement plan when before you even start, you're looking at a 30% increase. That shifts a lot of things. So Just a forewarning for everyone to be measured in their reactions, but also just know that we'll continue to keep thinking about, well, how do we get things done? Keith, you can go to the next one.
Thank you, Claudia. Next slide, please, Monica. And this is just another side of that. We talked about labor first and inflation. Steel prices are up 200%. Everybody's already heard about lumber prices. Hopefully a few of y'all aren't building houses right now and having to deal with that. Although lumber prices are starting to come back down a little bit, they've still affected a number of our projects. Those prices will come down a lot slower than they went up. And who knows what the continued rise in COVID, how that's going to relate to the economy and a whole host of issues. So just another point of making that the cost of projects is changing. And while all of this is important, Monica, can you shift to the next slide while I say this? While this is important, there's two issues happening with the CIP in any given year. We can stretch out our resources by trying to add as many projects into the CIP as possible, which is what everybody loves. But as Claudia noted, we're in unprecedented times. If every project is going to go up in cost because we just don't know 20 or 30%, and we've already stretched the CIP by putting in a whole lot of projects, we don't have room for growth and potential cost of projects. This is not a warning as much as it is a concern that on our side, we're going to have to make sure we have enough room for unexpected project costs. There's just a finite amount of dollars and projects the county can take on at any one time. And so it's the number of projects and the cost of those projects. And when the cost of projects are changing daily, monthly, yearly, it gives us pause and concern. And we're going to have to take that into account as just another variable to assess in our affordability model. Lumber and wood products, Claudia brought out this graph, and you can see in 1 year, lumber prices jumped 375%. It's been impressive. It's also been scary, and hopefully the lower trajectory will continue, but it's going to be at a slower pace. Next slide, please, Monica. So with that in mind, all I'm showing you here is the same slide that I went through each of those bullet points in the beginning, but want to emphasize the two areas highlighted in yellow. The strong emphasis on the upcoming CIP development or reassessment update is of the timing of improvement. So we have to match the ability to pay for projects with any potential timing alternatives. Everyone wants projects done now in the next 3 years, but remember it's a 10-year CIP. And so our ability to pay means trying to spread projects across time where possible to try to limit the stress, the financial stress on county resources. Second highlight is the one down at the bottom, is the use of that comprehensive debt model to manage that constant change. So this is where we have to try to bring in any number of resources the county has available. And just so the Board of Education understands, the county has had a capital financing policy in place since the late 80s, where they dedicate all of our Article 40 sales tax collection, revenue collection, all of the county's Article 42 sales tax collection, property tax dollars needed to support it, some occupancy tax dollars. All of these funds are dedicated by board policy specifically to pay for debt service. For the Board of Education to understand, it's about half and half right now. Half of our entire annual debt service payment of $60 to $70 million, half of it is for DPS related projects, and the other half is for county projects, some small amounts for DTCC and DPS. But we have dedicated significant revenue sources to support annual debt service payments related to all capital items. And we use this debt model to figure out how we're going to do it in the future. The one number, just like an annual budget, that the board has control of every year to pay for increased debt service is, and I won't make this a pop quiz, is the property tax rate. But that's a really political one that we have to be very judicious about increasing or decreasing that tax rate. And we tend to try to create a capital financing plan that keeps that rate at a relatively steady amount, either slow growth or slow reduction, although we haven't seen a reduction in that property tax rate in a while. Next slide, please. So we're going to move real quickly to the next steps that are going to need to move forward for the potential upcoming GO bond referendum in 2022 with the next general election. And then we're going to have to start in September of 2021 with our updated DECO facility master plan that you heard Claudia say is just about finishing up. And then between September and October, we're going to reevaluate the CIP and sort of work on getting that development. November will show updated cash flow projections related to a revised CIP. December, we'll present that CIP to the board. In December as well, we always have our financial advisor evaluate the draft CIP, make sure it meets whatever guidelines are necessary to keep our AAA bond rating. Through December and January, we'll have input from the public and discussions with the board, and hopefully that will include the Board of Education. January and February, the board ultimately will make a decision on discuss the CIP and make a decision in it in February. Next slide, please. Monica. Oh, I'm sorry, that was just the CIP dates. Now we'll shift to the GO bond dates, but it all rolls together. Just about the time the CIP is getting done, it's time to crank up the general obligation funding portion of that CIP. Just in February, we'll do some market testing with the public for a potential referendum, see what the appetite from Durham County citizens is for GO bond related debt. In April, we'll receive those findings. In June, we will have to start doing some technical issues with the state of North Carolina. We'll have to do a passage of a preliminary resolution by the board of an potential upcoming GO bond referendum. We'll have to mail a letter to the Joint Legislative Committee at the local government commission, the LGC. They're the oversight folks at the state level and all debt related issues for county and city governments. June 28th, we'll have a publication, a notice of intent for the public to tell the world that we're getting prepared to have a GO bond referendum. July 8th, 2022, we'll have to file an application with the LGC. July 11th, we'll have the receipt of written notice from the LGC that the application for approval has been filed and accepted, all technical issues, but key steps that have to go through to prepare for a November bond referendum. Next slide, please, Monica. More things in July. You feel free to look through those. I won't read them all. July 14th, we'll have a publication of the bond orders. August 7th, the LGC again approves the application for an issuance of bonds. That's a big deal to make sure that everything's in order, that we're ready to move forward. August 8th, we'll have a public hearing adopting the bond orders and a passage of a referendum resolution. Next slide, please. August the 11th, the county clerk delivers certified copy of the referendum to the Board of Elections. A few other key issues. The key thing is that November 8th is the referendum. What a lot of these things need to be boiled down to is there will be chunks on the GO bond that people will vote for. There will be a voting for, potentially the way we've done it in the past is there's a vote for the Durham Public Schools portion of a GO bond and or anyone else. Generally, we put on GO bond referendums for the public lots of things that are highly supported by the public. The last several GO bond referendums have been Durham Public Schools, the libraries, DTCC funding needs, and sometimes the North Carolina Museum of Life and Science. Those are generally the four areas that get on GO bonds. It doesn't mean other areas can't be a part of GO bonds referendums, but those four tend to be the most popular and will have the most success in a public referendum. And those will probably be the 3 years. I don't know, Claudia, if we're planning on anything major with the libraries for a GO bond referendum, but I'm expecting the board, the Durham Public Schools to be the major player in this upcoming GO bond referendum. I went through this really quick. If there are any questions, let me know. I believe the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, Monica?
There's more.
Oh my God, there's always more. November 18th, there's the canvas referendum returns. We got to find out how the vote went. November 28th, the declaration of results. December 1st is publication and statement of results for the referendum, and hopefully it's a positive for all involved. Next slide, Monica.
I think
now,
that's it.
Any questions? And we will have copies of this presentation if anyone wants it. I know Monica has it as a PDF and you can save it and see those see all those dates and the key points of those dates as you see fit. Any questions?
Questions from commissioners or board members? Commissioner, Board Member Byer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lane, and thank you for all the work on this. It's exciting to see. I just want to know, kind of, do you all have what you need from the school district as far as our needs? I see Dr. Monk and Mr. Davis and Mr. Palmer are on. Is there anything you all need from us? Are those discussions ongoing with staff? What do we need to do to be ready to support everything that you need?
The key things that, if I may be so bold to speak, Claudia, the key things that we're going to be sending out, my office is going to be sending out some applications for some updates of existing projects. Dr. Monk has done a great job identifying a number of projects over the 10-year period that was 2020 through 28, I forget. We've just added 2 more years to the end of it. And then I'm going to ask Dr. Monk and Paul and everyone over at the schools who deals with this, tell me where you are with existing projects, given what Claudia said about updating cost and timing for existing projects, as well as any new projects that weren't in that 10-year, especially ones that can be out in those outer years, the last 5 years, the 2 years that are on it that weren't on the CIP to begin with. Remember, every CIP just sort of moves to a 10-year and 2-year chunks. In this case, it may be 3 years, but be that as it may, I just want to make sure that Durham Public Schools and everyone else fills out those last years. So I will be getting information to Dr. Monk and talking with them, and we'll have, I'm sure, spirited conversations about what needs to happen. But we will give you all ample time to update your numbers, add some projects. That doesn't mean that everything that is requested, just like an annual budget, is going to automatically be accepted. We're going to have to go through our debt affordability discussions and see how that plays out. But we will be discussing with Dr. Monks and asking for updates. And once we get that, we'll fit it in and then we'll have public discussions. Claudia and Commissioner Burns.
Yeah. I'll make one quick comment. We've been in communications with Durham Public School staff. The main important activity that's happening is the same thing that we're doing, just a reassessment of what's in that plan, which is most important. It is also very difficult in this environment to cost estimate some of these areas. So don't be surprised if if we finish and vote on a package and 3 months later, if the markets are the way they are and supply demand issues, there are some swings that we just could not predict. In talking with our general manager, Jay Gibson, he shared about some particular products as it relates to piping that you can't even get a quote unless it's on the truck. And so I didn't do a good job explaining what that meant, but I do know that's a problem when you can't get a cost estimate and you're trying to predict as accurate as we can what things are. And as staff, that's how we're measured. How well did we project, whether it's the budget or a project? These are just tricky times. And I just spent some time on some of those factors as it related to labor and other market issues. So as to manage policymakers' expectations when we come back and say, hey, it may have slipped for a reason. We'll be able to tell you why, but just trying to give you a heads up of things that we're seeing. And I'm sure that you've seen with some of the projects from the schools.
Commissioner Burns.
Claudia said a lot of what I wanted to say because I heard Keith's sense of urgency, a sense of urgency that is often ignored, if we're really being honest. But Claudia, you hit it right on the head because, you know, when we think about 375%, if it's $50,000, that's $187,000. Like that's how much that lumber is, which is possibly the cost of what the entire house would have been, right? And so I'm using a house as an example. I know that before I got here, we looked at how much labor costs, how much construction costs were. And then once, Commissioner Lom and I came on, it had already jumped by another $200 million. It's safe to say that those costs are clearly over $1 billion today. And I know that, we're paying interest on some of this debt that we have. And I hear people asking questions about other things. And I'm closely watching the budget because I do want our teachers and I want our nurses to be fairly compensated. And I want the state to do their part. I say all that to say, I just want to reiterate in a couple of months when it becomes, let's beat up on the county staff again. This is not them. It's not even just about labor. It's not even just about the cost of materials. In a couple of months, and I've said this at my board, and I'm going to say it here. I talked last time, I've talked to the majority of the board members. It's not just about hotspots. Hotspots are not going to help Northern Durham. We actually got to get some wire out there. And we don't even have the workforce right now to get it out there. And this will not be an issue. The same issue that we had last year with nurses, that's what we're going to have with bodies to even do some of this construction. So since everybody, not just Murphy to Manio, but from Manio to LA County, will be looking for somebody to put in broadband, we are going to have a workforce development issue. And I think that Durham's in a better place. I want to make sure that we do get broadband out there. Commissioner Lom and I had a meeting with somebody, and this person had to go from a tablet to a cell phone to their phone, back to their it was insane. And so I want us to get our heads around, this is not going to be a hotspot issue that we can just fix with money. There's a lot of other pieces in there. And I say all that I now follow up with this question, since we did talk somewhat about construction. We put in an extra $40,000 into the Institute's contract in order for it to be a collateral duty to aid you all, and I'm talking about school board staff, in some MWBE work. So I asked for it to be put in the budget. It wasn't. We got it in there now. I know some of the staff have said, we can't hit this criteria. We have a lot on our plate. We really need a person for this. So now that we've got that, my question is, has that meeting taken place with the Institute? And if it hasn't, can that be planned in the not too far future?
And good morning, everyone. We have met with the Institute, Mr. Davis and myself, at least twice, I believe, over the summer before their contract was put in place, which I believe at the time they told us was going to be in July. Mm-hmm. And so now we'll be working with them to bolster our MWB program. It is something that we're all passionate about. We talk a lot about equity within the school system. And now that we have funding that's going towards a lot of capital projects, big dollar amounts, this is going to be a great opportunity for us to expand it out to the contracting community. So we're excited about the funding provided by the county for services that are going to be provided by the Institute. And we're going to incorporate that into our procurement process.
Thank you, Mr. Monk. And final follow-up, in the event that something else is needed, further support is needed, please communicate that to us. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Mr. Davis, because you brought it up once before. And I am hopeful that it's helpful and it is fruitful. Thank you.
So commissioners and school board members, just want to check, Monica, school board members, are there any guests or citizens on the phone that want to ask questions at this point? Are there public comments that we have not acknowledged?
Chair Howerton, we did not have anyone to sign up on our side. I did not receive any emails, nor do we have any citizens on the call. We do have Nicole Smith on the line, who's the executive assistant for the school board. Not sure if she's received anything either. We've been in communication via email, and she did not state that we received anything.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that. We've got about 15 more minutes. So if there are other comments, questions, Commissioner Jacobs, I see your hand. Let's see if I see anyone else. Raven, I think I see your hand, and Commissioner Carter. All right, Commissioner Jacobs. Yep.
Thank you. And I just want to thank our staff for this update on the CIP process and also the 2022 bond referendum. And I think looking at the timeline is really important, especially when we look at the bond referendum, because there's a lot of different steps and a lot of things that need to happen. So I think for me, and especially with some of the challenges that we're facing with rising labor and material costs, I think for me, one of the takeaways is the importance that we all keep working together really closely on both the CIP and the referendum, our staff, the importance of staff really working closely together. I think Board Member Byers' question about what do you need was a great example of that. And I hope that at our quarterly meetings that we'll at least have something on our agenda that at least is either a quick update on the CIP and the referendum process, just so we can all, I think, stay on top of these this important work that we're doing together. We may not have time to have big presentations, but even if it's just a memo or something where we could check in, I think would be helpful, because we're in such a landscape of flux, as we can see. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Commissioner Carter.
Sorry, technical difficulties. So sorry. I wanted to thank our staff also. I think this was an excellent presentation, and it's really great to have the details and the timeline and the cautionary elements of it, up front, so we know what we're moving into and we know what to be prepared for. So I really appreciate all that. I just wanted to make one comment about another cost I think we need to build into this, an increased cost, and that is increased investment in anything that will help reduce our carbon footprint and reduce carbon emissions, and just any sort of building standards that will help improve our environment for the future. I think we really need to just be prepared to make those investments. Otherwise, it's going to be a crime against humanity, a crime against the humanity of our grandchildren. If we don't make the investments now, we'll pay the cost later in just a horrible environment for our children and our grandchildren. So just wanted to say that and get that out there. I think that's a cost we're going to have to take on.
Board Member Raven.
Thank you. When I was listening to the presentation, it really made me think, because I know our team does a great job even when it comes down to looking at the modeling of how our construction is based off of when we're looking at that cost. But what I'm wondering is, from the county's vantage point, you all have the ability to kind of see in real time the increase in housing. You all are actually able to see the housing costs, like down to the nitty gritty, the real details of the cost of copper and everything that's going into these buildings. And what I'm wondering is, are we seeing that the costs it takes to actually build these homes and build these houses and build these buildings is actually being represented in the sale price and evaluation of those properties? And I'm wondering, are those two have some sort of alignment? Because I know when we're looking at projects to construct buildings, and these buildings can take years to actually come to fruition. And I'm understanding and I'm cognizant that you all have to keep into account how much it takes to manage those payments and those funding payments years out. But if the income that's coming in from the property taxes is equivalent to the increase in costs it takes for these homes to be financed and built, I'm wondering like what's that correlation? And I'm trying to get a idea on this, because if we're saying that there's a weighted average and we're saying that it costs 50% more to get these homes built in Durham, just overall, but we know that the increased value of the homes is going up 75%. That at least lets me know that yes, it's costing more, but the county is going to be able to bring in more revenue. I'm just trying to get an idea of how you all kind of balance that out, because ultimately, I know it's a difficult question, but ultimately, if it's going to take more money for us to get some of these schools built in the future, right? We need to also be able to kind of have some understanding of, are we placing an undue burden on the county by eventually having to ask for more additional support based upon factors that were outside of our control, and just being able to have that bi-directional conversation as this is ongoing. And it sounds like that's what Dr. Monk and Mr. Lane are currently in conversation about. But I just wanted to kind of talk about that in a holistic approach. Is that something that we're all cognizant of?
I think Manager Hager has her voice ready.
You're just
to
brilliant.
on what you just
That
said.
was a loaded question. And my head is, I'm thinking about lots of different ways that we can answer. And we will follow up with a more detailed answer too, because one, you are asking the question about price of construction, cost of construction for homes, for residential homes, or even buildings. And then the value of those and the correlation of that, which can go into a lot of different areas. And then what from a county we get from a return on that, and from a property tax perspective, I'm sure that was the other component. And then, so on one hand, eventually we will, because we're in a positive situation, we have not only growth, we're not like some communities where they are losing their residents. In Durham, this triangle area is a destination place. So right now we are truly in a great situation. On the other side, cost of construction for buildings, whether it's county or the schools, paying, if last year the building cost was, let's say, $50 million. But now, because of all of these other factors, it's $90 million. But my ability for debt is only, let's say, $200 million. That means my buying power and what I can do is less. And so although we can increase our buying, when we do our modeling and we look at what we're able to afford, if we're bringing in more tax dollars, if sales tax revenues are coming in at a constant or a higher level, that means that's more that we can borrow, although we do have debt limits at the same time. So I'm not answering your question exactly, but let us write something up to do it in a more comprehensive way, because it is multi-layered in how we need to respond. But a great question, and Keith can weigh in as well. And it would be great to have our tax administrator. Yeah, that's exactly who answer that question. Yeah, and Dwayne is a finance guy. He's a tax administrator, but he's definitely a finance guy. So I was excited when I heard the question. So. Before you start, Keith, I want to give, if you got a quick comment, and I want to give Chair Umstead and Superintendent Pascal time to be able to make comments.
They're more important than I am. I'll keep my mouth shut. I'll
No, if you have something you want to say, go ahead, just make it quick, and then give them an opportunity to speak.
Mr. Raven asked a pretty impressive question there, about a complex question, deep insight, and he's correct. I would simplify it by saying the growth in our property tax revenue that's due to the selling of houses is growing significantly, but that growth every year in revenue without a tax rate increase, that delta amount, that change from year to year for the county might be anywhere from $10 to $15 million a year, but that $10 to $15 million a year pays for annual increases to DPS, pays for annual increases in salaries for county employees, pays for health insurance for county employees, pays for departmental needs, and also pays for increases in debt service. So both of it's not a singular thing. It's annual budgets and the capital budgets. Where Claudia said, when a project goes from 50 million to 90 million, $40 million in increased cost in one project is not chump change. Even though we have to pay for it over 20 years, you only need a couple of projects to quickly outpace any growth in property tax we get from the selling of houses. And that's completely disregarding the annual budget growth that happens every year. So it's a mixture of all of those things. If I were to simplify my answer down, we are struggling to keep up with growth in our annual budget and capital project costs simply from growth in property tax revenue without a property tax rate increase. And I'll stop right there. Thank you, Commissioner Howerton.
Thank you, Keith. Chair Armstead.
Thank you, Chair Howerton. I don't have much to add, just a couple of notes of thank you. Thank you all for the mask mandate here in Durham. We were going to mandate masks in our schools, and it's helpful to have that mandate across the county so we know that people can feel supported and helping to reduce the rate of transmission. I'm excited about a bond in 2022, and we'll make sure we do whatever we need to support you all and get what we need in order to make sure our costs are accounted for there. And then I also like to say, as we are going into this school year, we will continue to be in communication because we're not sure. We're going to have a lot of protocols and things in place, but we might need to rely on you for some more support. So we'll come and have those asked. But thank you all for the presentations today. Dr. Mabenga, did you have anything to add?
Just want to say thank you to commissioners and Board of Education as well, and staff from the county especially. You guys been very cooperative, so we thank you for all the support. But I just want to put three things up there quickly. As we're trying to open up our schools, we have schools that have been open already. We have struggled the first 2 weeks when it comes to traffic because a lot of our students are now riding buses. So we're gonna need really support from our sheriff department, and the sheriff and I have been really in constant communication. He's gonna be able to help us for the first 2 weeks to make sure that traffic is really taken care of. So I really need to reach out to the city folks as well if they can help us for the first 2 weeks, because we don't want really the whole city or the whole county to be congested by the traffic, because we definitely can anticipate that. But one thing that I'm gonna ask commissioners as you're working with our health departments, we really need enough testing sites as we're going to open up our schools. We've been able to work with the North Carolina Health Department to be able to opt in for testing, but we don't know yet how that's going to look like. But if we're going to have 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. access to testing for not only our students, our community as a whole, we're definitely going to need it, as we all really envisioning to keep our schools open. But again, nobody knows the future, but we're going to do our best. We need the support from you all. Thank you for all the support that you're giving us.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I see your hand, Commissioner Burns? I think that will be the last. You're good.
No, I was writing. No, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Thank you all so much. The presentations have been great. The information is always valuable to all of us. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 16th, 21 at 9 a.m. And that one will be hosted by the Board of Education. If there is nothing else and all minds are clear, we can adjourn at 11 o'clock.
Thank you all.
Thank you.